large demonstrators against the socialist government could be heard from the streets of Cuba on Sunday, as American flags and chants of freedom were frequently spotted amongst the protesters. We're going to bring you the latest from Miami and reaction from the United States, including RT America's own Rick Sanchez. And mental health institutions are rapidly increasing in numbers. And one state in response is deciding to not accept any more patients. So where do they go now? Well, Natasha Sweet brings you this developing story. Then we're going to take a look at the round of executive actions signed by Joe Biden, aimed at creating more competition in industries like healthcare and big tech. But will politics get in the way of doing what's right for the American consumer? I'm Skynell Hughes, and you're watching News Views Hughes right here on RT America. Let's get started. You know, President Biden just issued a statement supporting ongoing protests in Cuba as the country's president blames America for its problems. This as thousands of people took to the streets of Little Havana in Miami, Florida to show their solidarity. RT's John Huddy has more from Miami.
As is often the case, when Cuba speaks, so does Miami's Little Havana. Cuban Americans in Miami voiced their support of their Cuban brethren in Havana and more than a dozen other Cuban cities, marching in a rare show of dissent against the government they say is responsible for a lack of adequate food, medicine, and electricity as Cuba grapples with a severe economic crisis worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic. Monday, the crowd in Little Havana was smaller, but just as vocal. Just behind me across the street is the Versailles restaurant. This is a very well-known Cuban restaurant in Little Havana, and it's really been the main staging area for these protests. You can see there's a good amount of protesters here across the street. There's a pretty sizable police presence, probably more police than there are protesters today, many of whom have been really driven back because of the ongoing rain and thunderstorms here in the area. But their voices are being heard above the crackle of thunder and lightning with backing from U.S. President Joe Biden, who in a statement said, quote, "We stand with the Cuban people in their clarion call for freedom and relief from the tragic grip of the pandemic and from the decades of repression and economic suffering to which they have been subjected by Cuba's authoritarian regime." Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel, however, blamed crippling U.S. sanctions on his country's ongoing economic hardships and social media for fueling the unrest.
We had been observing that in the last couple of weeks, a social media campaign against the Cuban Revolution increased, setting out the root source of the problem around issues and shortages we are facing, because that's the way it's created to try to create dissent, dissatisfaction that results in the protest by manipulating the emotions and feelings of people on social media based on the problems the people are facing.
Still, the images of the protests in Cuba continue and have been fueled on social media by U.S. officials, including Senators Marco Rubio and Rick Scott of Florida. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan tweeted Sunday the U.S. would, quote, "strongly condemn any violence or targeting of peaceful protesters who are exercising their universal rights." The last time Cubans hit the streets in protest against the government was back in 1994, well before the accelerant of social media could help fuel the videos and voices now heard around the world. For News Views Hughes, John Huddy.
Well, joining me now is someone who has personal knowledge of the Cuban people, but also has covered some major events in Cuba over the past few years, including you sat down with Fidel Castro in 1991. I'm sure that was an interesting conversation.